Hi, I'm Steve Damasco, Grandmaster Steve Damasco Shaolin Studios. Today, I'm going to talk about something that has been addressed on all kinds of national levels. This show will have nothing to do with martial arts. It has nothing to do with Shaolin, although I'll be in China next week training with the monks. And the only thing about this has to do with Shaolin. The only thing about Shaolin here in this show today is the fact that the goal in Shaolin is to improve the quality of life for all people. My goal here today is to talk about all this violence that's going on in this country between the blacks and whites, Hispanics, and just in general. And I hesitate to talk about things like this because I don't want to offend anyone. But I'm hoping that this will change the minds of how some people look at what is actually happening here in this country, and that with the information that I give you, that you may be able to think differently. And why do I think that I can make that change? Why do I think that I can help with that, with the situation? You know, I've lectured in inner city schools for over 25 years, mostly to black and Hispanic audiences. And gang members, which I've been working with for well over 25 years, gang prevention. And I've made a difference. I know this because I've seen it. So my goal here is to try to get you to think differently about what is actually happening and what it is that's really important and what we need to do. I'm not here to defend whites. I'm not here to defend police officers. I'm not here to defend blacks, African Americans. I might use a few terms today. I mean, when I grew up as a kid, we were using the term African American. Where I grew up, it was brothers and sisters. So whatever term I use, it'll change depending on where I am in this talk. There's one theory I have in life and why I've been able to be effective when I talk to people, especially kids that grew up like I did, is that if you want to help someone, you have to be completely honest about your own life. So this is a viewer discretion is advised. Please don't let kids watch this, because there would be things that I say that I wouldn't want my own children to hear. So that's the goal. I'm going to read a letter, and I've read a lot of letters. I'm on Facebook all the time. I don't post a lot, but I'm on Facebook all the time reading. I have news feeds all the time on all different, from CNBC to CNN to Fox, because I like to get a cross-section of how all these news stations view what's going on and their opinions. I'm going to read a letter that made me finally decide to say something and try to do something about this. This was on Facebook, and it got hundreds of thousands of hits on it, which means a lot of people read it. To all white people who are offended at being lumped in with whiteness as a whole, this is not about you as an individual. This is about you as a member of the privileged class. Whether you want this privilege or not, you have it, and you benefit from it. No matter how progressive you are, no matter how many black friends, no matter how much you speak up up or fight back, you will always have it as long as systematic racism exists. It's not about you. Think outside yourself. We won't undo these systems of oppression until we acknowledge our part in it. And we all have a part in it, whether we choose to acknowledge it or not. The part that really struck me was this part here. This is about you as a member of the privileged class, whether you want this privilege or not. So when I read this letter, I thought about my own life, and I thought about my mother's life and the kids that I grew up with. So I'm going to tell you about that, because in order for me to get this message across, you have to know where I'm coming from and what I've seen and what I've witnessed and what my mother taught me. Because that's what I do when I get up on stage. That's how I help kids. I've had 23 inner city kids living in my home since the day I got married. And all colors, all races. So it wasn't just black and Hispanic. There was white kids, kids like myself growing up. Let me first tell you about my mom. My mom was born with multiple broken bones and a lot of other type of disabilities. She was put in a Catholic hospital from the time she was born till she was 18 years of age. Now, just to give you an example of what that was like, the Catholics used to print a list of 10 movies you were not allowed to go and see, or you would go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. One of those movies, of the 10 movies that was a mortal sin, was Gone with the Wind. Because of that one scene, if you've watched that movie, it's a great movie. My mom painfully made me watch it because it's very long, was when Clark Gable carries Vivian Lee up the stairs to the bedroom. She's in one of those big gowns, fully dressed, no scenes beyond walking up those stairs with her in his arms. And because it was suggestive, that was a sin to go and see that movie. Of course, my mother went to see it. That was my mom. But I'm just laying that format out just to let you know how strict it was when she was a little girl. My mother was born with 4 fingers on one hand, in addition to all the other disabilities that she had. She had multiple operations over the course of that 18 years. At 9 years old, she went in for another operation, which she thought was another routine operation. She woke up, and both of her legs had been removed. My mother lost her legs at 9 years old. I can't imagine what a shock that must be to a child that had her legs and now they were gone without being told they were going to be gone. The reason she lost her legs is because the other operation had been bad and she got gangrene in both legs and they had to remove them. I don't think my mother felt like a privileged white person at that time. And I'm going to say that term several times during the course of the day of this talk. And I want you to know I'm not angry. I'm not angry at all. I understand why people are doing what they're doing. I understand about Black Lives Matters. I understand about how the brothers and the sisters are so upset. I understand all of this. I truly do. So I'm not angry. So this is not coming from anger. This is coming from being sad. It's very, very sad to me. It's very depressing. That's what this is about. From the earliest days that I can remember, I had a dad that, well, my mother went from living in a Catholic hospital, totally sheltered, to the streets of New York City, became a barmaid in Greenwich Village, New York City. Why she didn't see her family, long story, don't have time for that. But the main reason my mom didn't talk about it much was because she was upset that her family didn't really want her and put her in a Catholic hospital for 18 years. Maybe on the week, once in a while on the weekends, she'd go home. So she disowned them. And went straight to being a barmaid from a totally sheltered life in New York City. At 18 years old, my mother got married. 6 months later, her husband died in the war. She barely knew him. That's what my mom told me. Then she married my father. My father was about the worst you could get. I don't want to get graphic, but on all levels, think about what a man can do to his children, to his child, and his wife. On all levels, from physical to sexual. He did it all. As a little boy, I used to have to watch my mother get beat by my father and just cry, feeling helpless. Now, I'm being completely honest with you. Again, we were on welfare and didn't feel like a privileged white person, nor did I ever think about being a privileged white person. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know what color or nationality I was. Because when my mother finally left my father, a woman with an 8th grade education, 4 fingers on one hand and wooden legs, we went to the projects of New York City, Spanish Harlem. And why I say that I didn't know what color or race I was, because it was never an issue for my mother. She never talked about stuff like that. All she talked about was survival and the fact that I was the miracle child, because the doctors told her never to have children because she would die, or the child would die, or both of us would die. So I was the miracle child. So being in Spanish Harlem and not knowing about any type of race or color, my skin was olive, as you can see, and I lived in Spanish Harlem, New York. I thought I was Puerto Rican until I was 7. I mean, when I tell people that, they laugh about that because, well, they do believe me because they know where I came, you know, they believe where I came from. Why would I think I was a Puerto Rican? I lived in Spanish Harlem. They were all Puerto Ricans. Okay? And nobody ever talked about race. I saw things at 5 and 6 and 7 years old in Spanish Harlem, New York, with little children walking around with beer in their bottles, half naked, starving. We were hungry. We were always hungry. We had very little food. We had no toys at Christmas. I mean, things were bad. I saw children die at a very young age. I saw a guy jump out of a guy jump out of a 13-story building in the projects in Spanish Harlem in front of me. I can't tell you the things that I saw being pulled out of incinerators in New York City. I don't think I don't feel like I was a privileged white person at that time either, or my mother was a privileged white person. We were like everybody else. The only reason I know I'm Italian is because I was having dinner at one of our friends' houses in the projects in New York. I don't know how old I was, 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, and my mom wasn't there. She was watching me because my mom took a job which she wasn't supposed to do because there wasn't enough money on welfare as a switchboard operator. And she called me an Italian. I never responded to that. I remember this distinctly. I thought she was calling me a name. I went home, I was like almost in tears. I said, Mom, this woman, she called me an Italian. She goes, Steve, you are Italian. I didn't know what that was. She had to explain that to me. You know, back then when we were on welfare, we stood in line for free food. We didn't have those nice little cards that they have now that look like credit cards. You can't imagine what it was like unless you're that age, listening to this show, of what it's like to stand in snow or stand in a line with a woman with crutches and wooden legs, okay, to get boxes of free food, because that's the way welfare was then. We couldn't shop at grocery stores. We had to stand in line for free food. We'd get butter, we'd get bread, we'd get Spam. And by the way, Spam, don't ever eat it. I got a whole speech dedicated to Spam. I think all my mental disabilities came from eating that stuff. To this day, they don't know what's in it. Of course, I'm joking, but I won't eat Spam to this day. You know, they even figured out how to put chicken in a can, an entire chicken, okay? Well, I remember my mother opening this can of chicken, and she pulled the whole chicken out, and the bones were intact, and they were rubbery. I couldn't believe it. I remember that as a little boy. And it didn't last long. I think it was only on the shelves for a couple of months with the getting welfare food. And if welfare people don't eat it, it's bad. It was bad. I don't understand how, reading this letter, that we were privileged white people. You know, we growing up in Spanish Harlem was one of the worst experiences of my life. I went to school and till the 3rd grade. I went first, kindergarten, first, 2nd grade, and they didn't teach us how to read and write. Right. Look at this. I can't even pronounce my R's today. That's how nervous I am, because I am nervous about this talk. So we moved to Massachusetts, and after that, after the 3rd grade, my mother finally got me away from my father, and I stayed back in the 3rd grade. Because, in the 3rd grade in Massachusetts, in other states, they could read and write in the 3rd grade. And I couldn't, so they kept me back. So we moved to the projects in Brockton, Massachusetts, the Richmond Street projects. Now let me tell you about that. Whoever designed that must have been on drugs, because they did this one area of the projects, and I went to North Junior High School, and it was a really nice school with a lot of white people, okay? And I had to go through this giant field to get to that school. It was strategically put in a ridiculous place. So you either went through that field or you went all the way around, which means you had to get up an extra 45 minutes early to get to school. I don't remember any black kids except for one in that school. And that guy, Earl, and Alki, who was a Greek, were the star basketball, baseball, and football players. They were treated like gods, both of them. And this is him in an all-black school. I never thought about that. I just wanted to be like him. I just wanted to be like Alki. I was a kid when long hair was popular. My stepfather made me have a crew cut. Okay, I had pants that come up to my, that were too short for my legs. I couldn't cross my legs like other kids because there were holes in the bottom of my shoes. And then and we put cardboard in the hole to cover the hole. And then when the cardboard ran out, we put more cardboard in that shoe. I don't know how I would have been a privileged white person. I really don't. Or my mom living in the Richmond Street projects. All I know is that I wanted to be people are like me. I wanted to be like Earl, okay? The black basketball, baseball, football player, okay? Al Alki, same thing. By the way, those two guys, okay, got full scholarships to Harvard and Yale, all scholastic. I don't think Earl felt back in the 70s like he was persecuted, okay, at all. And again, nobody thought about color. I just wanted to be like him. I just wanted the girls to call my name, okay, in the cheerleader. You know, Earl so-and-so is our man. If he can't do it, no one can. You know, that was great. I used to dream about my name being called. But that didn't happen, which is okay. Because I had a mom that was incredibly strong, that never looked at being handicapped or physically disabled. She didn't want people to look at her that way. She didn't want to be treated special. She didn't want anything like that. Her goal was to get off of welfare. Her goal was to be treated like everybody else. There was no affirmative action for us. There was no privileged white things for us. It was all about survival. You know, when the projects, you know, people know, they really know it's really not about color in the projects. You know, when gangs shoot each other up and there's collateral damage because of that, it's not about color. It's about survival. Life in the projects is about survival. We don't care what color you are. If you hurt us, or especially our families, we're going to do everything we can to protect that. Regardless of color, white, black, Hispanic, it makes no difference. And anybody that grows up in the projects knows that. So again, all of this white privilege stuff and Black Lives Matter, I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. So that was what life was in the projects for me in Brockton, okay, when we first went to Brockton and I lived in the Richmond Street projects. And by the way, every single day, you think I'm kidding? Every single day, this kid, Richie Darsina, okay, singled me out. I would get bullied, slapped around, get my books knocked down, okay? I didn't look at Richie Darsina as a Puerto Rican. I grew up in Spanish Harlem. I looked at him as a kid, okay, that just loved to bully me. I mean, it got so ridiculous. I'm not kidding you. I'd go through that path. He'd be waiting for me every day. It got so ridiculous, I'd throw my own books down before he knocked them out of my hands. And it wasn't about him beating me up. That only happened a couple of times. He just slapped me around and humiliate me in front of his friends. I took care of that later. That's another story. But again, where was the privilege there? Where were the white people that are supposed to protect me, or the black people, or whoever, or the school administrators? There was none of that. And again, I wasn't angry. I was sad. I just wanted to be like everybody else. I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted people to like me. I wanted to be a football player and a basketball player and a baseball player and have people call my name out and look at me as somebody other than from the projects with holes in my shoes and pants that were too short and a haircut that looked ridiculous. Then from there, we moved to the other projects, okay, on the other side of Brockton. And I went to Brockton High School at this time. By the way, I left home at 15 and a half years old, almost 16 years old. I lived in an apartment with who people thought were my brother but was my best friend. 16 years old, I lived on my own. We had split sessions at Brockton High School. I worked 40 hours a week, and I went to school. And I was in college courses. Did I get good grades? Absolutely not. I was barely passing. But I was determined I was going to go to college. So I kept college grades, okay? I barely made C's and D's, and I didn't get any F's, I don't think. So now I'm in Brockton, and I'm living on my own. We had one car. Russell was my roommate, was older than me. He had a license, and we split everything. We slept in a bed that I don't think was much more than a little bit bigger than a single bed, because our apartment was so small, you couldn't get more than one bed in this apartment. And that's how we lived. I worked 40 hours a week, and I went to school full time. And I would give my mom much money as I could to my mom, okay, too, because we were still on welfare at that point. Then, for some reason, I went to a school, not for some reason, I went Brockton High School. Had 7,500 kids in it. If you know anything about Brockton, it's a very violent city then. It's getting a little bit better now, but it was extremely, extremely violent in the 70s. There was this kid, Dennis Burton. I talk about him in the book I wrote. And Dennis For some reason. He was about 5'9", 5'8", 5'9", never smiled. And nobody, there wasn't a black man, a black boy, a white man in that whole entire school of 7,000 plus kids that would mess with Dennis. He was an animal. He didn't bother anybody, but if you hurt him or you came at him, he just didn't lose, ever. For some strange reason, Dennis, in my junior year of high school, maybe sophomore, I don't remember, liked me. Why? I have no idea. But he did. And he protected me. I couldn't fight. I didn't start boxing until my sophomore year of high school, so I must have known him then. And he brought me into his house. I lost my apartment, and he brought me into his house. Never smiled, didn't say much. Said, Steve, you can come live with me and my mom. Mother was an alcoholic. She took me in. And it was then that I made all these friends that were all African Americans, black, brothers, sisters. I mean sisters. And they accepted me. It was the first time in my life that I felt accepted and feel like a privileged white kid. I just felt accepted for the very first time in my life. I grew up with no aunts, no uncles, no cousins, no grandparents, nothing. Because my mother disowned the family and she kept me away from everybody. So it was just me and my mom. And with a very bad dad, and I won't go into my stepfather, but it's my they're my sister's father. But it was the first time in my life that I ever really felt accepted. I was actually in the African American Club. They asked me to be in that. I don't think we did much except BS a lot and have a lot of fun. But it was a very violent place in Brockton. It was a very violent school. So don't think for 1 second that because it was back in the 70s that things were different. They were just as bad. I'll tell you how bad they were, okay? There was an issue with black women and white girls. A lot of black men, high school, were going out with a lot of white girls. And black girls, the sisters, did not like that. So they started beating up girls, white girls, every single day. Every day. They would bring them in the bathroom, attack them with their Afro-American code, beat them up. And then things got escalated from there. Now the black guys started in, okay? The brothers started in, and they were beating up teachers. It got to a point where we had cops, literally, in a school of 7,000 plus kids in all the corridors. Because there was so much physical violence going on. People were put into the hospital. And then the day came when everybody knew there was going to be a riot that day. So you need to picture that 4,000 plus kids, one half of them all white, one half of them all black, okay, and not many, well, Hispanic, Cape Verdeans, all on one side, face to face. And I was on top. I didn't even, again, the brothers wanted to protect me. Of course, you know who I would have been fighting with. But they said, no, Steve, we don't want you to fight. We will not let you do that. Can you imagine? Was I privileged then? You better believe I was privileged then, because they protected me. And I stood up on the roof of the school, which I wasn't supposed to be, and I watched it. They were face to face, and you know it was going to go down. And this girl that I knew, and I knew most of the black girls in Brockton, okay, boom, punches this kid, Kevin Giardino, in the face. And he was a big boy. She was a big girl. She was from the South. And then it started. It was brutal. The cops came in with the dogs, the tear gas. Nobody got shot, thank God. Okay, it was bad. They closed the school down. And for a week, they wanted to hold workshops. So I happened to be home one day, because I was still living with Dennis. And Dr. Jones, who was a black man, called my house, my mom's house, because he still thought I lived there. And my mom says, Dr. Jones, the superintendent of schools. Now, Dr. Jones was the principal when I went to North Junior High, by the way, so he knew me. Okay, wants to talk to you. And she looked at me and she said, Stevie, what did you do? I said, I don't know. I don't think I did anything. I wasn't in that riot. And Dr. Jones I said, hello, Dr. Jones. He said, Steve, it's Dr. Jones. I'll never forget. He had that deep voice like Barry White. And he said, we're going to hold workshops. And he didn't sound, I knew he wasn't happy about this. He said, but it turns out, this is exactly what he said. I'll never forget these words as long as I live. It turns out that the only person that the black community will let facilitate these workshops, black community, is you. So we want you to come to the school for the next 3 or 4 days and facilitate talks between blacks and whites. Because the black community said I was the only one that they trusted. Now, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why would I be that person? Why would the kids at Brockton High, the girls, oh, by the way, it wasn't just the guys that liked me and accepted me. I was going out with a white girl at that time, and she got pulled into the bathroom. I'll never forget this day, okay? And she was going to get beat up. And one of the sisters goes, "That's Stevie." Oh, by the way, I had my stepfather's name when I went all those years. I didn't change my name to my family name Damasco until I got married, and my sisters were married. So I was Stevie Thompson, just for the record. So they grabbed my girlfriend, throw into the bathroom, put her up against the wall, and one of the sisters goes, "That's Stevie Thompson's girlfriend." Immediately they let her go. So, was I a privileged white person? I was a privileged person. And so was she. It was so funny after that. Every white girl in the school wanted to go to me. The ones that all the cheerleaders at North Junior High that wouldn't even talk to me, even in high school, okay, wanted, because they had heard all about that, wanted to go out with me. Of course, I didn't go out with them. I wasn't, they didn't want me then. I don't want them now. But that's what happened. That's a true story. So I facilitated all these talks between blacks and whites. And when it got stupid, when white people said things that were stupid, that had nothing to do with fixing this problem, when the brothers, my friends, okay, said stupid stuff that didn't make any sense at all, that just came out of anger, I was able to say, you know what, this is BS. This is not the issue here. And nobody was upset with me. Was I a privileged white person then? No, I was just privileged because I was accepted. Why? Who knows? Other than the fact, same reason when I get on stage and I talk to inner city kids from the projects, gang members and wannabe gang members, they don't see me as any color. They see me as a kid that grew up like them, that had the same problems as them, that my mother, and all of us in the projects had the same issues. That's what they see. And they see that we survived. And we were able to do something in this country because we're allowed to do that and get out. So anyway, that happened. So the riots stopped and the beatings stopped in the high school. And then everybody turned their anger to crime. So crime went up tremendously in the city of Brockton. It was already a bad city to begin with crime, and it just escalated. So this teacher of mine had this idea, it wasn't my idea, of going to the chief of police in Brockton, who really hated kids. He just did. He was a big Irishman. Not that the Irish hates kids, but he was just one of those guys. And he set up a meeting with myself and the teacher and the chief of police to discuss the crime issue, because most of the crime is being done by all of us, not me. They kept me out of that too, believe it or not. There were things I wanted to do with them just to belong. And even then, street kids, project kids, kids that wind up going to prison or are dead today because of shootings, kept me out of it. They said, no, you stay here. Was I privileged? Yeah. They made me privileged. So anyway, This is interesting. We have a police in the background, the siren. We talked to this chief of police and we said, look, we'd like you to come to the high school and talk to kids with a bunch of officers, with dozens of officers, because Brockton had a police department. He said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I said, look, if you want these kids to understand how this works, okay, and that to let them know that cops are human, that policemen are human, and they do care about kids, that's the only way this is going to work. Of course, I had to open my big mouth and say things like that. And he said, finally he conceded and said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. I said, then I went on to say you can't come in uniform and you can't wear guns. You could have seen the look on his face. I won't even go into the look on his face, but you could imagine. I was just telling this big Irish police officer, chief of police, okay, who doesn't like kids to begin with, that it's not a good idea. I didn't say you can't. I was a little bit more diplomatic than that, believe it or not, okay, and I'm not really known for my diplomacy. So was that you can't come into this, it's not a good idea to come to the school in uniform or with your guns. Well, after about another 10 or 15 minutes of that talk, he agreed. They came in, a lot of them, and they talked to kids one-on-one, wearing regular clothes, and us kids, all of us inner city kids. They weren't all inner city kids, but the majority of us that got into trouble and did all those things were all from the projects, or from, welfare, or just inner city. I don't know what term to use at this point. And this went on for a couple of days, all day long, because they shut the schools down for that. And we held workshops. Afterwards, the chief of police called me back into his office with the teacher. And he said, Steve, I had no idea. I don't know how it happened, but you have changed my whole opinion of a lot of these kids and what the real issues are. Crime that next year, dropped down over 20%. That's a true story. He called me back in my beginning of my senior year, and he said, there's this program. How much time do I have, Rick?
Half an hour, 28 minutes.
There's this program that the federal government has got that they'll pay for your college for 4 years. Again, I didn't have great grades. My SAT scores were mama hoo hoo, that's Chinese, meaning tiger, tiger, horse, horse, not good, not bad. Italian, it's mensa, mensa. But anyway, they'll pay for your 4 years of college. It's like basically, I think, I don't know what they called it, but it was a federally governed program, and they pay for your college, and then when you come out, okay, you go to, you do at some point I think you do the training school in there while during college, but anyway, you become a police officer by the time you get out. You have to commit to working for as a police officer for so many years, and they'll pay for all your college. It's a federally government program. I was psyched. I wanted to be a cop. I wanted to be a police officer. I think back now, why? So funny, you know what I mean? You come from a violent place, and I wasn't really violent. I mean, after I learned how to box, and Dennis made me go to boxing, take boxing, and nobody hurt me anymore. But I was angry about life. But I was a good kid. I mean, I was good to everybody, nice to people, because that's what my mom did. But I was angry. So I think, all I can think about is that Robert De Niro and Al Pacino movie where at the beginning of the movie they say, people respect the badge, but everybody respects the gun. I don't think so much about carrying a gun that excited me about being a cop. To be honest with you, it's like, I wanted to be in a police car. I wanted to turn those lights on. But it was a position of respect, and it was a position of power. And again, power is utilized on how you utilize it, whether it's good or it's bad or it's abusive or non-abusive. But we all wanted to be somebody. We all wanted respect. And we respected the police. I mean, we didn't have to like them, but when we saw a badge, when we saw a police officer, when we saw those lights go on, we respected it, or I did. And a lot of the brothers and sisters did. We all did. We were afraid. So I wanted to be a cop. So anyway, I signed up for that. It got approved. And not long before I graduated from high school, the chief called me back in. He said, Steve, I'm really sorry. The federal government has canceled the program. It's funny how your life turns out. So that didn't happen. So I was going to be a cop. Interesting, huh? When you look at today's world and what's going on, I would have been a cop. I want to say another thing about my mom. My mom, with the 4 fingers on one hand, 8th grade education, goal to get us off of welfare, wooden legs. I got to tell you one story. I have time. Because this story, okay, defines who she was and who I am and what I believe. When we were living in the Richmond Street projects, for some reason my mother decided to get up on a stool and try to get something off a shelf. Nobody was home. Oh, by the way, she had 5 kids. All lived, and all are still alive, except for one. My brother died at 32 years old, my half-brother, of AIDS. That was tragic. Didn't feel privileged then either. But she fell off the chair. Now remember, she had 4 fingers on one arm, in one hand. So it wasn't a great hand. And the good arm is the one she fell on. She went to the hospital and got operated on. And she came home with a jar with the bone, which was about that big. Big bone out of the arm. The doctor said she'd never use that arm again. Well, that was my mother's only good arm. She would get in a wheelchair, and she would take the bad hand, and she would take her chair, and she'd get the wheel on this side. And I said, Ma, let me push you up to the door. No. That's what she said, like that. So she'd pull herself up to the door, one wheel at a time. And then she would take her bad hand, which I think was the left hand, and she would pick her bad hand up like this and put it onto the door handle. And the pain and the tears, I used to stand there and watch her coming out of her eyes because she was in so much pain. A woman that had so many things go wrong physically in her life, never mind mentally and personally. So at first she could just touch that door handle and barely hold on to it. And then she would try to turn it, and that was beyond imagination. She would scream. It was so painful. Until my mother could turn that door handle on her own. Nobody told her to do that. The doctor said she'd never use that arm again, just like they told her she'd never have children that lived. And she would turn that door handle, and I'd watch that until she built up the muscles somehow around that arm that was never going to be used again. And it was, I don't know if it was good as new. She never complained, but she was able to use that hand. She said, Stevie, you know, back in the old days, when they had the long dresses, she could walk so well on those wooden legs that she didn't even need crutches. And then one day she had dropped me off at nursery school or kindergarten, I don't remember, and a truck ran over her car. She was driving with the hand controls. And she was in the hospital again. I missed it. I didn't tell you that. And then after that, she had to be on crutches. She couldn't walk without it. She said, this is my only good arm, Stevie. She said, there's no way I'm not going to be able to use this. I need to use this arm. And she did. And that is what I witnessed, things like that. I don't think we felt privileged then either. I didn't feel privileged wearing pants that were too short for me, or standing in welfare lines, or having shoes that had holes in them and had to replace it for months with cardboard. And then when the cardboard ran out, we put more cardboard in. I didn't feel privileged then. I don't feel privileged now. So that's how I grew up. That's what I saw. My mother was the founder for the Head Start program in Brockton, Massachusetts. It became a volunteer job for almost 2 years. She was working 60 hours a week. She loved the program. In case you don't know what Head Start is, it's a program that helps mothers that want to go back to work in school to take care of their kids. It pays for that. After a couple of years and working 60 hours a week, the job became national. Head Start was going to be a program by the federal government, to this day funded, national. Well, they had to post, obviously, it's a government job, in the paper. Head Start, I forgot what the title was, whatever my mother was doing. Requirements, college degree, 4-year college degree. My mother, who put that program on the map in Brockton, was not qualified for that job. I was out of my mind. I now was very angry. And I went up to her and I said, she looked really calm about it. Like she didn't qualify for the job that she put on the map. She worked 60 hours a week, 50 to 60 hours a week for 2 years. And now it's a paying job and she doesn't qualify for that because she had an 8th grade education? Were we privileged then? No. Now I sound a little angry because I was angry that she didn't get that job. She wasn't going to get that job. And I went up to her, and this was the most humbling experience I think to this day in my life. And I said, Ma, why aren't you upset about this? And she looked at me and she said, I'm just glad, Stevie, that such a good program is now federal and it's going to help so many people. She wasn't angry at all. She was happy for the people because this program was going to help so many single moms. Well, it turns out that people protested somehow. I don't know how it happened. Because my mother was, I don't know, people loved my mom. And she got the job. And she worked that job till the day she died, and she died young. My sister, Franny, has that job. The director of that agency, okay, my mother hired. She worked for my mom, and now she's the director. Oh, she's retired now. But my sister still works there, Franny, and my other sister works in a non-for-profit similar to a Head Start. Because that's what we knew. We only knew about taking care of people, regardless of who they were and where they came from. I got to tell you about Henry. I'm now doing well. I'm out of college. I worked really hard. Didn't get great grades. I used to laugh about certain subjects in school because my mother would ask me what my grades were. I didn't live at home, remember that? And I'd say, oh, this this subject was an I. She says, what does that mean? She says, well, I didn't fail. She goes, what does that mean, Steve? I said, it means incomplete. I didn't go to class. It was insignificant. I got out. It took me a long time, but I got out. Went on to get my master's degree in psychology. But, you know, having said that, we didn't feel very privileged. You know, I did well with my life. I've worked really hard. My mom worked really hard. She worked for the Head Start program and became, when my mom died, it was 300 cars at a funeral. She never got to see my kids. Henry. I hadn't seen Henry in years. I'm driving with my twin boys in the back. They were little. They were in. I remember how old they were because they were in the car seats. And I'm in a Mercedes-Benz. And I always used to go back through the projects, and then I go down Main Street where this Kmart used to be. I think it was Kmart or Gilchrist one. I don't remember which one it was, but they closed down because there were so many thefts in that store that they couldn't stay open. And it was basically a barren street, even that street then. It wasn't Main Street. I forget what street it was. But anyway, I'm driving down in this black Mercedes, and I see three guys that look like they're Hispanic, and one black man. And I slam on the brakes. My wife doesn't know what's going on. She's freaking. I slam on the brakes, put in park, open the door, and I start running towards them. Well, at that moment, this is exactly true. My wife will tell you this story. I might sometimes exaggerate, but I'm not exaggerating this, and I haven't exaggerated about anything I've talked about today, okay? He reaches in, those Puerto Rican guys reach into their pocket to grab their gun. As I see that, I snap out of it because this was Henry. I knew Henry. He was the guy that gave me my first beating. Why Dennis had me take boxing lessons, but we became great friends after that, okay? It was over a white girl, by the way. Eventually I got her to go out with her. But anyway, I went to, when I saw them reaching for the gun, I said, Henry, it's me. He stops the guys. He says, he looks at me, he goes, Steve, runs to the middle of the street, grabs me, hugs me, jumps back, look at you, hugs me again, look at you. It was like he had just gotten out of prison doing a 9-year stretch for killing somebody. They came up later, I think, somehow that he was somewhat self-defense, but he only wound up doing 9 years, which is a lot. He told me he had just got out of prison. I knew he was in prison. I said, you got out? He says, yeah, I just got out. And he's doing a deal again. So I said, yeah, you got to meet my wife and kids. And so I bring him over and I introduce him. And he looks at my wife. I mean, this is 9 years in prison for killing somebody. And he looks at my wife and said, are you taking care of my man, my boy? And she goes, yeah. And I showed him my kids. And he looks at me. Hard to say. And he says, you know, I was talking to the guys. And we said, if anybody made it out of the projects, we were glad it was you. Are you kidding me? This is a hardcore killer. And he had done a lot of other things that I knew about. And he looks at me and he says, I was talking to the guys, Steve, and I hadn't seen him for like years, 10 years. We were glad if anybody made it out, it was you. Was I a white boy privileged? Yeah, I was. By him and by all of them. That was a privilege, and the only privilege. So that was the last time I saw Henry. He died shortly after that. And then I got a call a couple of years ago from a friend that told me Dennis Burton's brother died, Junior Burton. Also treated me unbelievably well, very smart, had a great family. So I went to the church and the funeral, and it was an all-black church in Brockton. This was only a couple of years ago. And I was the only white person there. Again, I'm using that term loosely, because I never looked at myself as anything in terms of color. But people were getting up and saying things. And I was with Dee Dee, who was a friend of mine. She was a sister who I always wanted to dance with at the dances, but she had this big boyfriend that was huge, that I never danced with Dee Dee. And she said, Steve, you got to get up and say something. I said, I can't do it. This was Dennis Burton's brother, Junior Burton, who treated me like a brother. And she made me do it. And she went up and held my hand. I cried. And then after that, I was really hard to talk because I cried. I said he was my family. Other than my sisters, who I helped raise. But family, that was my only family. And after I finished the talk, his daughter, who I never met, came up right as I got off the podium and threw her arms around me, said, I love you. Thanks so much. Was I privileged? Yeah. I was extremely privileged that day, again. Not as a white person, but just as people that accepted me. So the preacher there, a bunch of the people in that church really asked me to come back to that church on a regular basis, but I live 2.5 hours away. I will go back. So, you know, that's some of the things I got to say. And in closing, I want to say a couple of other things. I don't understand this Black Lives Matters. I don't want to say I don't understand it. I do understand it. They're angry. But we're going to accomplish nothing with this. Absolutely nothing. You're going to incite white supremacy groups. There's going to be more riots. White people are going to get killed. More cops are going to get killed. I understand why everybody's angry. But we need to have a different mindset. You know? We really need a different mindset. This mindset. My mother's mindset. It has nothing to do with color. It has to do with survival. They were bad politicians. They were bad cops. They were bad everybody. But there were a lot of good people. And there were a lot of good police officers. I've been working with the FBI, as a citizen, the Secret Service, the Department of Homeland Security, state police, local police, for 30 years. I can't begin to tell you how dedicated these people are. If I don't know what the circumstances were against these shooting exactly. I wasn't there. When you're in the heat of a battle, okay, nobody knows except exactly if it was really filmed well. But if there is something that went bad, if they did something wrong, then hold them responsible as an individual. You can't categorize and kill white people and kill cops. You know, Michelle Obama, I mean, I'm not pointing the finger, but I was infuriated. I watched her give a speech at a predominantly black college. And she says in her speech, I wake up in a house every day that was built by slaves. What are you kidding me? At least she wakes up in a house, never mind the White House. I didn't have a house. My mother didn't have a house for years, or my brother and my sisters. I wake up in a house? What is she accomplishing with that? I'll tell you, I listened to the whole speech. If I was a black person, even as a white person, I would want to hurt white people. What did you gain from that? What does it gain for the President of the United States to say Christians killed Muslims? I mean, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. What are we going to accomplish? What Michelle Obama should have said is, look you got the greatest opportunity in the world. You graduated college. You're smart. You're going to be somebody. Look at Barack and I. We president and first lady, and we're black. So the world is an opportunity to you. If we can do this, can you imagine what you could do? If I was her, if I was him, that's what I would have said. I would have inspired them, not make them angry. I didn't get it. I hope, if one person changes their mind, just changes their mind about how that are upset, then I've done my job today. I hope I didn't offend anybody. But you want to know something? The Hispanics, the blacks, the whites, the Jews, you got the Jewish Defense Leagues. They're not out there in America killing Palestinians. They might be supporting it. That's a whole other world in those countries. Everybody's been persecuted. None of us felt privileged when we grew up. White, black, Hispanic, whatever. We got a terrorist issue in this country. That's what we should be concerned about. We need to take our heads out of the sand. It's here. They've been coming into the United States through Mexico for years now at 5,000 at a whack, waiting for the call. Well, the call is here. I can tell you this, and I'm not going to get into it a lot, okay? Al-Qaeda, Hamas, their MO, come here, give us your money, we'll train you, we'll send you out, do bad work. ISIS, stay where you are. You want to send us money? Great, we don't need it, we have oil money. And we'll tell you what to do. They're here. We should be uniting against that. Blacks, whites, Hispanics, all of us. Because we have children, we have grandchildren, we have families. And they're here, and they're determined to kill us. Radical terrorists. They're determined to kill us, and they are killing us. That's what we should be reuniting. We should watch that. We should help each other. I'm not a preacher. We need the President and the First Lady to stop talking like that and tell us all what we can become, not where we came from. We all know where we came from. We all know what life is like. There's nobody privileged here. We make our own privilege. My mom taught me that when she got up to that door handle, when she became whatever title she had at Head Start, where she overcame multiple operations, where we had no relatives growing up, where we stood in welfare lines. All of it. When my father abused us both, when there was no food on the kitchen table and we would have saltine crackers and milk, and my mother would give me the milk and put the saltine crackers in it, and that would be my breakfast. And I'd say, Ma, let's share the milk. She goes, no, I love saltine crackers. I don't need milk. When my mother would go to have a boil on her leg this big that she had to be rushed to the hospital just because she was going to work with those old heavy wooden legs, and that thing would rest against her leg to the point where she was rushed to the hospital again trying to make money because there wasn't any food. There'd be no toys under the Christmas tree. I was okay with that. I just wanted to make my mom happy. She was sad for me. I wasn't sad. Life isn't about me. It was not about my mother. It was about improving the quality of life of people. And until we have that, until we think that way, it's just going to get worse. And I pray to God. I did bad things. I stole food. I did things, to feed my sisters and my brother, and steal clothes to do that. I wasn't proud of that. I could have been in jail. God had a different intention for me. And I do that work, not because I'm a good guy. I do that work because I feel privileged to be here, alive. That I'm not dead. I'm not dead. I'm not in prison. We all wanted to be somebody. There wasn't one of the brothers and sisters that I grew up with, and that's all my friends were. My family was. that didn't want to be somebody. We were all going to be somebody. And then they look around and they look at me and say, well, we're just happy that you're the one that made it out. That's all I got to say. Again, I don't want to offend anybody. I'm not angry. But that's how I see it. And I know it's not going to get better unless some of us start turning that thinking around and start thinking like that, like my mom did. Thank you for listening. I'll see you soon.